Just Like Us for LGBT young people.
Hello, Sarah.
Hey, James.
How are you doing? It's 2020.
Yeah, new decade, new podcast episode. It's been a while.
It has been a while. Have you got any New Year's resolutions?
Oh, I've decided a new tact this year is I'm going to try lots of different resolutions and hope that one sticks.
Ooh, just at least one win.
Yeah. Maybe I'll read more. Maybe I'll learn to juggle. What about you?
I love this. So I think I told you about this. My resolution is to read one book.
Ah, yes. High hopes.
Achievable goals.
While you're literally doing a degree as well.
While I'm doing a degree. I am doing a degree. I tend to forget that. My resolution is to have a great year.
You know what? I think that should be everyone's resolution. And I think you just inspired me.
Yeah. What are we talking about this month?
I thought you'd never ask. This month we're discussing National Storytelling Week, which is actually the first week of February, so the 1st to the 8th. But we're getting in early. And we thought it fits really well with Just Like Us and everything that we do. So we thought we'd come and have a natter about it.
Yeah. Just because I definitely think Just Like Us is obviously the work that we do in schools is very much a storytelling platform.
Yeah, definitely.
In that most of the assemblies and workshops we do is our LGBT ambassadors telling stories about their lives growing up as LGBT young people. And I think it really gives a unique perspective on it. It can really help relate why these issues are so important.
You're listening to Just Like Us, the monthly show for LGBT young people.
I didn't realise until we were doing our Just Like Us training to be ambassadors, I didn't realise how much of an actual story I had, you know what I mean? Because you just live it and you never think to piece it together and kind of think, oh, okay, who were my first celebrity crushes? How did this influence how I, and how I moved through life and what were the little moments that kind of built and what do I consider important in my story as? And I think that's something that's nice to look back on regardless of whether you're LGBT, but in terms of being LGBT, it can have such an impact and a message with it, which I think is really great.
Yeah. I think it can be really healing to tell your own story because like you said, having to think about it and structure it makes you realize that you're more impressive than you thought you were, if you know what I mean.
Just thinking that. You think, wow, I actually got through some stuff.
Yeah, because when you're 13, you feel like this is life. This is what life is always like for everybody. And now looking back on being 13 and 14, I'm like, oh God, how did I do that?
Definitely.
That was so grim all the time.
Yeah.
And I think, looking back on those stories now in order to tell them to other people, it can be quite oh, actually, I can now process some of the stuff that happened.
Definitely. And beyond just your own story, hearing other people's stories can be great because one, you either hear a completely different perspective from yours and you're like, wow, this is what this person was going through and this is how it affected them and it's so crazy that everyone in the world has a completely different story. That blows my mind on a daily basis, but I won't spiral. But also you can recognize parts of, what is a gay experience or an LGBT plus experience and kind of recognize that in other people's stories and kind of relate to them. And I just think that's so lovely that there's a kind of a base layer that a lot of LGBT people experience that is the same and that we all have in common. But I think also if you think about representation in terms of the media, sometimes you can get very extreme situations of coming out. And I think when I was growing up, if being LGBT was mentioned in any way in the media, it would be that it was this thing that you were ashamed of, and then if you came out, then it would be horrible, or your mum's crying over it, It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Versus if we have these kind of more normalized stories of people where they came out and it was a big deal, but also there's more of a development, and also sometimes for some people it's not a big deal, and for some people it is very easy.
Yeah.
And I think just having that variety of experiences being told in schools, especially at that age, I think if I'd had that in my school, it would have just been so life changing. I think it would have really made me think that maybe things aren't so bad. So I think it's nice to provide some kind of context to kind of balance out what can be very extreme representations in the media.
You're listening to Just Like Us, the monthly show for LGBT young people.
So, for National Storytelling Week, we had very thankful to some of our JLU ambassadors who have very kindly
telling us
submitted some of their stories. So, we're going to be hearing from them now. This section is from one of our ambassadors, Georgia. Thank you very much, Georgia.
So I didn't actually admit to myself that I like girls until I was 18. I grew up in a small town with very little LGBT plus representation, and I wasn't friends with any other girls who were openly LGBT plus. It left me feeling a bit lost and confused. Before I came out, I wished that nobody had assumed I was straight in the first place. I thought that coming out was going to make my life drastically different, and I remember thinking I could just be happy pretending to be someone that I wasn't, and I'd have an easy life by being who others expected me to be. That was up until I got into a relationship with a girl, and I realised I wanted my family and friends to know about her. I remember the day I told my best friends. I was so anxious. As I was on my way to meet them, my thoughts were racing with a million things. The thing is, my friends have always supported me, and they've never said or done anything to make me think that they'd react negatively. But I just think no matter what the situation is, coming out can be a really daunting experience. There's so much going through your head. But as soon as I told them I had a girlfriend, I just had this massive relief. They didn't make a massive deal out of it. They just reacted the same as if one of them had just told us they had a boyfriend. Later, they did have a few questions about how long I'd liked girls for and stuff, but they were always kind and supportive, and they've never made me feel like they viewed me differently after coming out.
Now we're going to hear from Ramses. Thank you so much.
As a kid, I was sent to an all-girls school until year 9. Apart from my brother, I didn't really talk to any boy until I was 13-year-old. That meant that for a long time, I had a quite stereotyped way of thinking about boys, which only came from movies and books. And I thought that gender had to do with what I liked and what I looked like. So what was the difference between feeling like a masculine girl, a tomboy, and feeling like an actual boy? I thought that being a boy meant that I had to look the part, so go to the gym, have muscles, comb my hair, have a deeper voice. At some point I just wished that I had a magic wand to change everything about myself, so other people could see that I was a man too. But then I started realizing that I was already seeing myself as a man, and that was the answer. I understood that gender wasn't about what I looked like or my hobbies, but it was only about how I felt. And I definitely felt like a boy. I was just trying to find ways to show it to other people as well. And that didn't really mean that I had to change anything about myself, because I'd always been one. And boys can have long or short hair, so I didn't have to cut mine. And boys can like pink or blue, so I could wear them both. And just in general, men come in all different forms and shapes, and that was still valid. And the only thing that made me a man is knowing that I am one.
Next up, we've got Heather.
When I was still at school, I was in year 11, and marriage equality was announced. And this was so exciting, obviously, for the movement as a whole, and also for me personally, because as a closeted bisexual, it was really important for me to know that whoever I fell in love with, I could marry them. And that was so exciting. And so I wanted to celebrate this. And so I made some posters and I bought some big bags of Skittles, and I just put some signs up saying, Marriage Equality Act is announced, have some Skittles to celebrate the whole rainbow being included. And I went to put these in the library because the library often had charitable events and this sort of thing. And I was good friends with the librarians and they said no. And I felt so rejected. I honestly was so shocked. I couldn't believe it. I'd gone from being so happy to feeling so isolated because they kind of said, oh no, we can't. We'd have to get permission. But they didn't suggest that they would try. And then in the weeks to follow, none of my teachers mentioned Marriage Equality Act being passed, this incredibly important piece of legislation. Nobody mentioned it. None of my peers talked about it. And I just felt so alone. And so I think it's so important to remember that it's not just about places not having homophobic bullying or cruelty, but also people actively discussing LGBTQ plus issues and celebrating LGBTQ plus stories. And I think that's why what JLU does is so important.
You're listening to Just Like Us, the monthly show for LGBT young people.
Okay, so thank you so much to all of our contributors this week. We hope you've had a good time, listeners, and we'll see you again shortly.
Yeah, we hope you've enjoyed listening to those stories. See you soon.
Bye, Sarah.
Bye, James.
You've been listening to Just Like Us, the monthly show for LGBT young people. The music was by Twisterium. We come into schools too. Young people, teachers and parents can find us at www.justlikeus.org.